start by initially HTML first. I'll share my screen, yes. So what is HTML? Its full form is Hypertext Markup Language. So HTML is basically used to give structure and meaning to your web pages. Think of it like a foundation or a framework that gives shape to your content. You can add headings, paragraphs, images, and any stuff that you want to basically. HTML might not technically be a coding language, like it doesn't really have any logic as such, but it is used to render web pages on your browser. This is a quick skeleton of what a very basic HTML code looks like, right? It has a HTML tag, it has a title, it has a body, and H1 and P will get into the tags as well. Talking about the tags, in HTML, you do everything inside tags. You have the outer HTML tag, you have a head tags, body, H1 and P. So what do these tags mean, right? So the doc type HTML initially is used to declare the HTML5 page. It helps the browser render the page correctly by identifying it as HTML version. The HTML tag here is the root wrapper that wraps everything inside of it. The elements, the head tag, or the body tag. The head tag contains of everything that is not rendered on the page, but that is useful for the HTML file, like the linking to a CSS file or other character encoding and stuff, character description and stuff like that. The title tag is basically what here, as if you can see my cursor here, HTML and CSS is written. What text is shown on the tab preview here, that is what the title tag defines. And the body tag basically has all the content that is being rendered on your HTML page. So whatever is being rendered here is being rendered in HTML in the body tag. And then the other everyday content tags are the H1 to H6, the heading tags. Heading tags are basically the title tags, whereas H1 is the biggest size and H6 is the least size. Titles is in, for example, if I have a title here, this might be an H1, this might be an H2, and so on in decreasing order of sizes. The paragraph tags are basically used to define paragraphs. Like it automatically adjusts spacing for you around the paragraph and helps you write content easily. The A tag, also known as the anchor tag, is used to create hyperlinks. Like, for example, on a browser, you must have clicked on a link which takes you to another web page, another website, basically. That is what anchor tags are used for. The image tag is used to render an image on your web page, which the SRC takes the URL or the where the image is stored, and the alt is if basically your image fails to load due to an internet issue or any other issue, it mentions the alt text message that will mention here in the instead of the image. Then you can also create lists in HTML, like lists are being created here in two formats, in UL, which is the unordered list, and OL, which is the ordered list. And whatever content that you want in the UL or the OL tags, you need to mention them in the LI tags. We'll get on its implementation here as well. We'll just go to the theory ones. The BR tag is the break tag, which automatically takes the cursor to a new line. So basically, like when you click enter on a document, for example, it takes the cursor to the next line, similar to that. And the form input is basically an input tag where you just input your details. Like in any form, you must have filled email, password. That's the input tag. We'll initially start off by making this small little page now first, and then we'll get on the DOM part. I'm assuming everyone has the VS Code installed, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll open VS Code. On here, if anyone hasn't used VS Code before, on the top left, there's a file section. On this, we'll click on the open folder. We'll go to documents or any other directory. You want create a new folder. Basically. Okay. Select folder will have the web option open here. We'll click on this symbol, the new file symbol here, and name it as index.html. Uh, is everyone with me till now, or is anyone still behind? So I'm assuming everyone is with me. I'll start with mentioning doc type. As I told, doc type is used to define what version of HTML we're using. We're using HTML5 here. And then HTML tag, which contains a head and a body. Is everyone with me till now?
Yes.
Yes. Then in the head tag, firstly, we'll define the title of the web page. As I told, the title was this part where you, on the tab preview, whatever text that appears, here we'll write any text like first web page, for example. The anything that goes inside the head tag, right? That is not exactly rendered in your HTML page, but it is used for stuff like title or if you want to import any CSS page, or if you want to mention the character encoding of what character set you need to use for your web page, like character set UTF-8 that allows you to use emojis and all that stuff as well. That's one of the latest ones. In the body tag. Okay, I'll run this by the way. To run this, you can just go to where you had stored this, open this folder and just double click. This would take you to the browser and you can see at the tab, this is your first web page title here. In the body, we'll write a basic H1 tag. Welcome to my website. If you want to uh, save the changes, you'll have to refresh it once, and then you can see the H1 tag is being rendered here. Welcome to my website. After this, we'll use the P tag, which was a paragraph tag used to write content, used automatically create spacing for you as well, right? We'll write hello, I'm learning web stuff. I'll save it here, go back, and once I refresh, I can see this paragraph tag being rendered here. So is everyone with me by now, or is anyone having any doubts till now? Fair enough, I'll take that as well. Then H2. H2 is, as you'll be able to see, somewhat similar to H1, just smaller in size. These H tags are just used to define titles. Yeah. As you can see, this was an H1 tag. This is a H2 tag right now. Under this, I just added a about me section in the paragraph tag, which is again just a text field here. Then we'll go on to what we learned about lists, right? There were two parts, an ordered list and an unordered list. For an ordered list, you use the OL tag, and for the unordered list, you use the UL tag. We'll start with the UL tag first. Unordered list basically will not specify any meaning to or any order, specify any order. It will just give you bullet points. Unlike the ordered list, which will actually, for example, use numbers like 1, 2, 3 and specify a hierarchy. So we used a li, the list tag, just to mention the items inside the UL tag. In li, I wrote HTML, CSS, JavaScript. We'll save this. Once I refresh, you can see this does not have any order or any meaning. This is just some bullet points being rendered. Once we are done with this, we'll also learn about the anchor tags, the A tags that we learned about, right? Which is used to create hyperlinks. We'll create that as an ordered list now, or a list of multiple items. So OL tag I've written here. I'll mention in list item A, href is equal. Href is basically the URL that you want your browser to render once you click on that particular link. HTTP. ACM-VIT. Once I save this, uh, when you use an A tag, you also need to mention some text between your A tag. So I've written ACM-VIT here. This gets rendered here as well. And the href, whatever URL I've mentioned here, when I click on this, this takes me to C users. Okay. Basically, what this has done now is find a path in my local directory with https://acm-vit. I can use a target blank, which will basically take me to a new tag. So when you use href here, it takes you and adds that https://acm-vit.in URL right here. So you can see https://acm-vit.in. And when I add this target blank option, it takes me to a new tab every time. As you can see, it opened a new tab. My initial website did not have any difference. Okay, I made a small error, I think. If you add the colon and slash slash here, it will actually take you to the website. Now, there was one more tag that I'll just add another list item so that you know what the ordered list means. As you can see in the unordered list, it had no meaning. It was just a list of bullet items. And here there's a clear hierarchy of items that is there. One more tag that we studied about was the input tag. For example, whenever you open any website where you need to fill out your details, where you type out your details, that is the input tag where you fill out all the form. As you can see here, it created a input field as well where I can type my details. And if we need a placeholder here, like something that tells us what this input box means. For example, your name. It has a placeholder here. Enter your name, and when I click on this and I start typing, it goes out. That's what a placeholder is. Was everyone there with me, by the way? Does anyone have any doubts or had any issues while coding this? Hello.
No doubts as
Yes.
well.
I think Kavya has a doubt.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, when you were doing the hyperlink thing, what was the purpose of target? I think you mentioned it, but I don't think I heard.
Yeah,
Like, what is
target.
target?
Yeah, so I'll explain. For example, when I just use an href here, I'll save this and refresh. When I use an href, the website that renders it opens in the same tab here, right? And most probably, I wouldn't want that happening. So target blank basically creates a new tab for you and opens the link there. So when I click now, oh, I have to refresh. When I click now, this would take me to a new tab, a blank tab, and then this URL is used. So it does not affect my initial page anyway.
Okay, okay, got it. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll take that as an and start with DOM basically. So DOM. DOM is document object model. Like when a browser loads a web page, it reads the HTML and converts it into a structured model called the document object model. Like you can think of it like a tree structure as you see. For example, if you have a document, it has a HTML tag. All the tags basically are made into a tree format. You have a HTML tag, then you have one head and one body under the HTML tag. The head can have a title, any other link tag, or any other import that you're using. And the body can have whatever field you want to render, like the H1 or P. So basically, in this page, the HTML tag would have been the root node, then the head and body, then under the body, the title, and then under body, all the items. And under UL, you would have these list items. That is DOM and how DOM helps us, right? DOM defines the structure. For example, if you're using JavaScript and you want to access any HTML tag that has any particular content, for example, DOM helps us there. It navigates its way through the DOM and then it easily gets access to whatever content that you might need. So this is a kind of image that you might understand by DOM. Does anyone have any doubts about DOM? Like it's one of the most important concepts of how web programming even works.
Can you explain it once again?
Yeah, you think, okay. So DOM is document object model, right? So when a browser loads a web page, as you can see, there are multiple tags that are used to create this web page. So what the browser does is it takes all these HTML tags that I've coded here and it makes a tree structure like this. As you can see, the document, the HTML, head and body, then whatever is inside the head and whatever is inside the body, right? So this tree structure helps us to get access to any content, any leaf node inside the HTML. for example, if I needed to get access to this P tag or this A tag here, I would need to go to the HTML first, then the body, and then the A tag inside it. HTML, body, and then the OL, LI, and then the A tag. So how this helps is basically when you're using JavaScript or any other language and you need to get access to any particular content here, the DOM tree helps you there and modify any part of the page as and when you want.
Okay, thank you.
We just did the hands-on mini page. Does anyone have any doubt regarding what we studied here? Anything like even from basics, the tags, DOM, or anything inside the code that you all didn't understand? No doubts, right? Chat, nothing. Yes. Okay. I mean, since anyone does not have any doubt, I'll just ask like a very
Hello.
simple. Yeah,
I have a question. So,
yeah.
is there a hierarchy of tags or leaves in the DOM tree where maybe after one tag cannot be the parent of another kind of tag?
I mean, that's how your browser understands and renders web pages, right? For example, as I mentioned here, you initially mentioned doc type HTML to define that it is a HTML web page. Then you use a HTML wrapper that basically, again, it's more of the same thing that specifies that this is the HTML page and you need to render it accordingly. And whatever content that you want to display inside your web page, that has to go into body tag, and whatever content that you want outside the web page, like the tab text or any other CSS file linking or any imports of the CSS file, that would go in the head tag. So this is kind of a basic structure that your browser expects. If it does not receive any similar structure, it would obviously mess up in rendering the web page in the first place.
Could you experiment and see what would happen if you tried to render maybe a H1 inside a P tag?
Sorry, H1 insider,
P tag, paragraph tag.
P tag. Yeah, sure. For example, using an H1 here. As you can see, it did not make any difference at all. So basically, even if you mention it inside a P tag or anything, it's the immediate parent, the H1, that takes care of its rendering. Like even while using the or list items, the or li, when I mentioned an anchor tag here, it rendered it as an anchor tag. If I would have mentioned a p tag here, it would have just rendered a text. Yeah, you can see it's just a plain text, and it automatically created spacing as well beside. Like as you can see, the spacing now is gone as well, just created by the paragraph.
Just another small doubt. Why did this spacing suddenly come when you removed the link? Like, how did that work? And
Yes.
like, if you instead, like, you had two li tags, like, what if I added a p tag in between, like after one li tag and before one li tag? would that mess things up, or is that fine?
Yeah, I'll get to your first part. Like, for example, as you said, where did that spacing come from, right? When you use a p tag or a paragraph tag, like when I used your uh, p tag, right, it automatically creates spacing around the text. So that's where the spacing comes from. And secondly, if I use a p tag in between two li tags as well, see what? It most probably should not render any point as such because any list item that is rendered must be, as you can see, any list item must be inside those li tags. If you use any other tag here, it won't be rendered as a list item, but due to the sequence in which it is put here, it would still be rendered.
And like just another small thing, in the top you added the p tag, and could you add more stuff in that p tag also, like where you added h1, like that would follow the default p tag thing, right? So we can basically do any form of nesting and that works.
Yeah, like we can do any form of nesting even inside a P or inside an H1 tag. Like, do you have anything specific in mind or like just in general?
Okay, like what if I add a p tag inside a h1 tag? Like, does not make any sense practically
Yeah.
to ever do that, but that seems weird because having a sort of small text paragraph in between, yeah, if you added something and you added some text there.
In most ideal case, it should still render this as a P tag and not an H1 tag.
Okay,
But
so
we'll
the immediate parent takes place
immediate
in this
parent.
place. Okay.
It did not. So I think what it did is basically take H1 as its parent title. Like there is a hierarchy of tags as we talked about here as well, right?
Okay.
H1, P, and stuff like that. It took H1 as its parent tag and rendered that, and took the P tag as its content.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Anything else? Anyone?
So
Okay.
actually, when just H1 was mentioned, no, there
Yeah.
was no space. But when P was also mentioned inside that, what you can say that welcome to my website, the
Yeah.
margin was actually implemented in the website. So is it like, it's getting both the properties of P and H1?
Yeah, it's getting both the properties. Yeah. For example, like when I added P here, I'll remove the H1 in the first place. And when I just keep P, you can see there is some spacing here at the left as well, at the top and bottom as well. And when I
Mm.
add, sorry,
Yeah, nothing, nothing.
yeah, when I add H1 above it, did not affect the spacing as such, but it just added the sizing of the H1 tag and used the spacing of the P tag. Now, if I were to remove the P tag from it, you can see the top and bottom spacing is gone.
So is it like, that welcome to my website,
Yeah,
what you can say, that text,
yeah,
acquired the styles of H1 and the styles of P also?
yeah, yeah. The same thing. Yeah. For example, H1 gives a particular font size and boldness to this text, right? And paragraph tags allows content to be displayed and give spacing as well. So when nesting both of them together, it took properties of both of them.
Okay, understood.
And it did
Thank you.
not happen in the ordered list here because it wasn't mentioned in the list item tag, the li tag here. So it
Oh,
just rendered as a
okay,
basic.
understand. Understandable.
Anyone else? Sanida? Fair enough then. I think we'll start with CSS. Okay, yeah. So CSS. Basically, I'll recap what HTML was. HTML is used to give structure to your website. For example, these tags that we use here, the H1P, the anchor tags, stuff like that. It gives you a raw bare bone of the web page. What CSS is used is to basically beautify the web page. Like for example, add colors, fonts, spacing, layout, and basically beautifying the web page. What you can see here, like even if I inspect this very basic page, it might have a very raw HTML right here. It has CSS as well. Yeah, as you can see, this is the CSS as well, and this is the HTML. The CSS is basically what is used to beautify a web page. Uh, Talking about CSS, there are three ways to add styles in a CSS file. You have an inline method, you have an internal method, and you have an external method. So what these three do is basically, for example, you have an HTML tag right here. And in the P tag, I want to mention the color. I'll do color blue. So basically the color changed to blue. This is what inline CSS does. You can just take an HTML tag and write a style parameter here and just mention it CSS right here. And then you have an internal style as well. What that is as we talked about the head tag, right? It doesn't actually render anything, but it helps in rendering your body element. So the style tag, if I use it inside the head and give properties, it would give the CSS properties as well. I'll use here in the head tag, I'll add a style tag. Then I'll take H1 color green. I'll remove this one. And when I refresh, the H1 tag is converted to green color. This is your internal CSS, writing it in the head tag. Then you have an external CSS where you create a separate .css file. You write your CSS there and you import those styles and use them. So like when working with larger websites which has a lot of tags, which might have a lot of CSS, it's recommended to use separate CSS file and just import those styles here. So I'll, for example, to create a new CSS file, I'll just create here and name it style.css. And to import it there, I'll use a link tag. What this is link tag. This is a relation. This defines that whatever you're importing is a style sheet. It will use those properties to style the document. And the href is the location of wherever your style.css is. It's in the same folder, so you can just easily import it as this name. And in this, I'll add h1 color yellow. This turns the color to yellow. Welcome to my website. So this was an external way to add CSS. Now there is something called specificity. For example, if you have multiple types of CSS being used, for example, you have inline, you have internal and external all being used in your web page. So as I used here, there was in this inline I had done blue color. In the internal, I had done green color, and external, I have yellow color. So how does the browser know what style to exactly use here? So the browser has a list of priority for your styling. So inline style has the highest property. Whatever you put in this tag here with the style property will have the highest priority above all. Then the internal styling in the head tag, and then the external CSS file. This will have the least priority. Then the browser default styles, which is like basically when I don't have anything. The default background is white and basic styles, the font, those have the least priority out of all. This, yeah, this is basically a example of linking your CSS file as I did here. In the link tag, I used relation style sheet and referring to style.css as the file location. Is anyone having any doubts till now with CSS or internal? Anything with internal, external, or inline CSS?
Now, can you please explain internal again?
Yeah, internal. So you understood inline, right?
Yes.
Well, yeah. Inline is basically whatever inside tag you try to add the styles here. Now there's another method to use the head tag to add styles. As we discussed, right, the head tag doesn't actually render content, but it helps rendering the body. For example, if you want to use a separate CSS file or use style tag to add styles or define character sets. So if I add a style tag here inside the head and I use the H1 tag to give color green, you can see this would turn green. This is a method of internal CSS. You can write your CSS inside a style tag in the head tag, or you could use a separate CSS file or inside tags as well.
Okay, Bhaiya. Thank you.
No one else has any other doubts, right?
I had it out.
Yeah.
So like you used for like welcome to my website, we used H1 and P both, right? So like when we style it, can we use P for styling?
Yeah, you can use any inside nested. Like, for example, if I remove, I've added style here, by the way, inside the P tag.
No, for external, like if we do it externally, or
Yeah, yeah. So that's why I was going to get into selectors, right? I would select P tag and give it a color, for example, orange, for example. All the P tags have turned into orange, but this still remains aquamarine because of the priority that you mentioned, right? Inline has the highest priority, and the .css file has the least, the external CSS.
okay, got it.
Yeah, like, I can use the same property in the H1 tag as well, and it would just mean the same thing. No, if I use it in the H1 tag, this applies the P tag property because its immediate parent is a P tag.
Got it, got it.
This is, yeah. To link it, you mentioned the relation style sheet and the location of your CSS file, and then you just use it. Now we'll get on to selectors. So, for example, when you're trying to use external CSS or internal CSS, you need to mention what part or what tag that you want to add your CSS properties to. For example, when I'm using inline CSS, I don't need to mention what tag I'm mentioning it to, right? But when I use it inside a style tag, the web page needs to understand where I'm applying to. So that is where selectors comes in. So for example, if there's, we'll go on one by one. We'll start with an element. For example, any H1, any P, H2, any tag that you want to give properties to, you just use that letter here, P, and then give the CSS properties right there, like color blue, like what I've done here. I just mentioned a H1 here, then I opened the brackets and I gave the color yellow property here. That is to give all tags. As you can see here, all P tags here have an orange property. Then coming on to classes and IDs. So classes and IDs are two ways that you can select elements. You can give these properties to these tags here and select any particular element that you want to give your properties to. Like I'll demonstrate it here. I'll use a ID equal to, for example, gray. When I use hash gray here, only this part becomes gray. Whereas even if it was a P tag, as you can see, it was a P tag here. It used the gray property and applied the gray color. So how this works is, I'll explain the difference between class and ID first. If you use an ID, it must be unique for every pages, every element. Like I cannot have two elements with the same ID. If you want to have that kind of a structure, you can use classes. That's what they're meant of, to basically give properties to the similar properties to multiple places. If I use class here gray, and dot gray, is applied at two places. Like I gave it at the H2 tag and the P tag class. This is used to apply similar properties to whatever places that you want to maintain consistency basically across the whole website. Now you also have a universal tag. What universal tag does is applies properties to the whole web page. Like for example, if I was to use asterisk color as red, and I would remove these properties from it. I would remove these properties from it. This applies red to basically everywhere. Selects all the elements in your DOM, the document object model, and gives those properties to all the tags. Now, then there's a group. So basically, if you want to give same properties to two tags here, like H1 and H2, then you can use the grouping system. How this works is, if I have an H1 tag and I have an H2 tag, I can just comma separate them, and this would apply only to the H1 and H2 tags. I should, yeah, this would apply only to the H1 and H2 tags. Then you even have a descendant selector. So what it does is, I'll explain the syntax here first. You have a div, base P, then color green. How it works is, if you have any P tag inside of the mentioned first tag, it applies those properties only to them. So I'll explain this with the help of ordered lists. For example, if you have uh, unordered list and then a list item, it should make the color blue. How it works is, you had list items here as well, right? This is an li, even this is an li. But I had mentioned UL and then li. So any unordered list which has list items, those would have these blue colors in. This is the descendant type. Does anyone have any questions regarding the selectors? We can get on to trying to implement that. I'll take that as we know, guys. So we'll get back on VS Code, by the way. I think the last thing that we did was just create an index.html, right? We'll have to create your new file style.css. We'll have this here and your index.html. So does everyone has this ready?
Oh, I guess there's a doubt एक बार chat check कर ले.
Yeah.
Can you see the chat? या फिर थोड़ा read it out?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
So ph1 hello, but I'll need to copy this. No, Shriraj, to take, as I can see from your structure, right, you have an P tag, inside that you have a H1 tag, and inside that you have a H2 tag. So to select an H2 tag, you'll have to do H1 and then H2 and then a similar format. Like, you know what? Let's try this out as well. Yeah, as you can see, your hello and your world is rendered. So from the logic that you told, P then H2, color red. This does not do anything because a P tag does not natively have an H2 inside of it. But if I do H1 and H2, even then it does not do. I think to natively select an element, is anyone saying anything on the chat? Yeah, hello. So basically, I think to natively select an element inside a tag, you need to have a nested tag inside a tag. So for example, if I just remove this H2 here and a PH1, Yeah, hello. Sriraj, I think, yeah. No, no, it's not. I think because H1 is dominant because of H2. I think you cannot use a native HTML tag both ways. You have to use a div tag somewhere or create a proper nesting. Like you have three tags that are nested inside each other, right? That I think creates some problem with the DOM tree while using the group selector. Actually. Yeah, and basically we should not nest H1, H1 and H2. Okay. Cool. So what we were doing, we were trying to understand the selectors here. So let's create a empty. Did everyone create the CSS file? Uh, Hello. I think that as a yes. Okay. We'll start on by adding some items to apply CSS tag. So an H1 tag, it says welcome. By the way, what you see here, the div tags, basically when creating a HTML page, you just create it into divisions so that it's easier to code and it's easier to apply styles to as well. So we just use these div tags to create separations between items. Div, side the div, we have a p tag. So is everyone online with this part? We'll start with the selectors. Uh, we'll start by IDing this basically. I'll ID this as main. ID is just a identifier, like as we discussed, right? To give a property to a unique element, we use the ID tag, and to give it to multiple elements and maintain consistency, we use the class ID main. If you all can see, I've given the ID and class to the H1 and div tag respectively. Then we'll start with the styling. H1, we'll just give it color red. We use the tag selection here, like the H1 tag. We don't need any dot or hashtag before you just directly picking up tags unless necessary. We can just apply it in. We can see H1 tag has the color red. Now, if anyone remembers, can someone like tell me what do we use for a ID and what we use for a class? Like anyone remembers the selector?
Hash and dot
Yes. Which one is for the class?
dot
Yeah, that's it. We'll use the dot card. We'll just give it background color as green. Yes, this is given the background color green here. Then can someone tell me for IDs as well? What to use for IDs?
First,
Hashtag.
Yeah, that's right. Hashtag main background color yellow. We can see yellow has been applied here as well. Is everyone on track with this? Is anyone having any doubts or if it's behind, they can tell. I think it's fine, yeah. So I think, yeah, Sriraj, the doubt that you asked, will get on the group selector now as well. For example, if I want to I'll add a p tag here as well, called hello. This is here. So if I want to apply a property to a p tag that is only inside a div tag, I'll use div, then p, then add color orange. So as you can see, only this p tag has the color orange and the below one is still in black because that is not inside a div. We've used div space p here. So the p tag inside the div that gets colored, but the p tag outside, which does not have any parent div, that does not get the orange color. That is the group selector. Does anyone have any doubts or
The difference
any other?
between a class and ID was like ID used to be has to be unique, right? Or there's anything else?
Yeah, for every page, like for example, if you have multiple HTML pages, on every page an ID should be unique. And classes, you can use class to apply properties at multiple pages. Like I can apply the class here as well. Class equal to card, and this would have a background green here as well.
Okay.
That's the difference. This is usually used to maintain consistency. Like if you have multiple blocks of code inside your website and you want to apply similar styling, you won't keep on writing the same CSS every time. So you just use a class and give it the same property. Anyone else having any doubts? Fair enough. We'll take that as a no. And one thing that comes to your mind while using websites, modern websites, or anything that you create. For example, you must have used the Instagram website on your mobile, if anyone was sane enough to use that on mobile and on desktop. You must have noticed that it works properly on your phone and your laptop both. So how does that happen? That happens with the help of responsiveness. You make a website responsive such that it works on all sizes. For example, if I inspect this, as you can see the welcome, the text here, it overflows when the screen size reduces. That means the website is not responsive. If I open any other website, for example, YouTube for say, when I use the inspect tag, you can see this is responsive on all scales. That is a good way to create websites so that everyone can use it properly as well. So there are multiple ways that you can create a website responsive, by the way. There's box modeling, there's Flexbox, and there's grid. We'll start with box modeling, by the way. So, like every element in CSS, every div or every tag that we use is a rectangular box which has four areas, which has the content, which is the text or the image inside the particular rectangular box. It has the padding, which has space inside the border. I'll open Xcarry Draw to explain this more clearly. Okay, I'll just use a raw page here. So box modeling. For example, I have this rectangular box as my HTML element, and I have some content here. Let's see. Hello. If I have this content written here, you have four sections here: content and then padding. Padding is the space inside the border. For example, this is the border of my HTML tag. This is the content. Then this space right here. The space right here between the text and the border, that is known as padding. That is usually used to create space between your HTML tags. Then you have a border which can have multiple properties like border thickness, border color, border size. This is your main border of the HTML tag. And then you have something called margin, that is space outside your border. For example, if you have two HTML tags side by side, this margin is what defines the space between the two of them. If you want the space to be more, you can just mention more space there. Otherwise, by default, it will be adjoint without any space. You can specify margins and give it space accordingly as well. This is a box model, the initial layout of understanding how the tags render, basically. Then you have Flexbox. Flexbox is a one-dimensional way to make website responsive. So what do I mean by one-dimensional is, for example, you can specify the direction of Flex. I'll start by explaining Flex first. Um, for example, you must have seen, I'll open the example of exam cooker. As you see these items here, right? These are mentioned one below the other. And as you can see here as well, these are mentioned one below, one right of the other. So this is what a flex direction of row is, and this is what column is. It defines in which direction the elements are structured. Column means it's placed one above or one below the other, and row means left or right of each other. So the display flex property is used to uh, enable Flexbox. Basically, lets the CSS know that you are using Flexbox. Then flex direction is used to define the direction flex, like if it's row or it's column. The items that you're using inside the flex should they be in a row or a column structure. Then justify content and align items. These are used to center, like you must have heard about the very famous joke of centering a div. You use Flexbox. That's one of the methods to center a div. Justify contents centers it horizontally and align items center it vertically. So, for example, if I have a div right here and I have a text here, hello, without any flex property, it would initially be at the top here. Now, when I use justify items, it aligns itself horizontally to the center. Meanwhile, vertically, it stays at the top. And then when I use align item, it centers vertically as well as horizontally. So it remains at the center. Even if I resize this, it would at any point remain within the center of the div. And then flex wrap. Flex wrap is a property which is used to wrap your content within the original box. So for example, if I have this text, this overflows outside of the div. So how a wrap helps is basically it creates new lines and makes sure the content is wrapped inside the div and it does not overflow outside. Does everyone understand Flex? Any other specific property that someone did not understand? Okay, then we'll go to Flexbox. We'll go to Grid, sorry. Flexbox, as I mentioned, it was a one-dimensional layout. Grid layout is more of a two-dimensional layout. For example, when you imagine your Excel sheet, right? it has rows and columns. That is how grid specifies how you're placing your item. So it gives you a control over both your rows and your columns simultaneously. Its properties again. Display grid is used to enable grid. It tells your CSS that you are using grid properties. Grid template columns. It defines your structure of the columns. For example, how many columns would you have, or what would be the size of them? Like for example, when you're using this grid templates, repeat 3, comma 1 FR. It specifies that you are using 3 columns. Repeat 3 means 3 columns. And FR means flexible space, basically. It can dynamically change its size accordingly. And grid template rows 100 pixels, auto and then 100 pixels. It means the first row, whatever you have, it adjusts according to its size automatically. And 100 pixel is the fixed size of the rows later on. Then gap 10 pixel is the spacing between items, basically, or your rows 10 pixel. These box model, the Flexbox and grid is one of the most important things while designing a website and while making a responsive website. So if anyone has any doubts regarding anything. Yeah, you can just use grid template columns auto. You don't need to specify 2 times. So does anyone have any other doubt? Right, okay, fine. We'll start on by understanding box model hands-on. So if everyone can open their file once again. I'll just mention a div structure here, which has 3 tags, for example. Hello. So welcome to my first book. Oh, yes. So talking about P tags, I'll add a background color first so that you'll be able to understand the box model better, the spacing and all those. I've added a light blue colored background for reference. So we'll start off by padding first. Padding 2 pixels. As you can see, I'd applied a 2 pixel padding, a space on all sides of the container or of the div, basically. Now I can even do 2 pixel, 4 pixel, 8 pixel, and 16 pixel. So what it does basically is it defines padding in all directions. So as you can see, 2 pixel is applied on the top, 4 pixel is applied on the bottom, 8 pixel is applied on the left, and 16 pixel, if you can't properly see, but it's applied on the right side of the hello text basically. Now talking about border, I'll just do border. Pixel solid black for it. So that's what border does. The solid, as you can see, 4 pixel solid black. 4 pixel is the width of the border. Solid just defines it being bold, right? If I remove solid, it won't be there. Solid specifies how, for example, if I'm doing 4 pixel, I'm giving a particular width to the border. I need to mention solid. That mentions that there is a border there. And the color. I can use blue as well, but would work anyway. Then we learn about margin as well. Margin, if I give 10 pixels, for example, it created a 10 pixel space on both the sides, even on top and between. If I make it 100 pixel here, you can see it much more clearly. It has given a 100 pixel space on all sides of each twirl. So we'll start by Flexbox first. I'll give it a ID content. Before starting, let's see its structure. By the way, yeah, this is all vertically placed. Hello world, welcome to my first page. While adding style, I'll use the content. I'll use display flex. Flex direction, it was column initially. I'll just mention row. Let's see what happens. You can see hello world, welcome to my first web page. All have been applied in a one-dimensional row format. And then I can just add properties like flex gap 10 pixel. This would add a gap of 10 pixels between each of the three tags. This is a flex direction. This is a very basic flex basically. If I do column here first, this would just apply a gap of 10 pixel vertically. Now there's a very cool feature in CSS. If I do column reverse, it will reverse all the tags and display it in a reverse order. Welcome to my first web page, then world, then help. Now we'll do grid format, right? Display grid, grid template columns. I would create two grid template rows, two as well. As you can see, I've used two FR and one FR for the grid template columns, and grid template rows I just use basic two. So as you can see, I'll just use an inspector to show you as well. This for me created a grid format which has this as one element, which has the world as one element, and the welcome to my first page as a third element. Now I could have a fourth element as well, which would be displayed. As you can see, the fourth element, the world, it came at the empty space. This is a grid format basically. When I try to make this responsive, you can see the text already shrinks. Even if I show you the flex format, this would automatically adjust its content as much. So this was CSS layouts, the box, the grid, and the flex layout. Does anyone have any question? So these are at any time one of the most used and important concepts. Basically. Now this is the last thing for today, by the way. Then we'll get on to making a website by themselves. Media queries. So what are media queries are basically, again, this is the same thing to make website responsive, except it has properties like max width and properties like min width. So how it works is if I use a media query with @media and I apply max width 600, this would apply the styles only if the width of the screen is less than 600. For example, I would use how I'm opening is, by the way, right click and then inspect element. You can just easily open this. As you can see on the top, here the width is 5 and 7 pixel, and this is a 600 pixel screen. If the size is less than this, only then the style would apply. Otherwise, it won't. This is how one of the best ways to make a website responsive. Like you can have viewports defined for every screen size and add the styling accordingly as well. So to just demonstrate it once, I'll use a media query here. @media max with 600 pixel. So hashtag content background. So when I try to refresh this, so as you can see at the top left, the width of the screen, as soon as it gets more than 600, the properties go off. And when it's less than 600, the background blue applies. This is how media queries help you basically make it more responsive. And one final thing, there are some responsive principles that you keep in mind while writing CSS. So talk about units first. Percentage. So what percentage is? It defines the size of a div relative to its parent div. For example, I'll open xValue again. If I have a if I have a parent div like this, and if I want to structure a div inside of this, if I mention its width as 50%, it would always be the 50% of the parent. If the parent gets small, this would get smaller relatively as well. These are key principles to make a website responsive. As I was showing on our website, I'll open YouTube again. As you can see, it's always the divs that you can see are always relative to the parent div somehow. Not exactly hard coded anywhere. It takes a certain percentage of it and it sticks to that percentage. Then the next one is EM. EM is relatively for the font part, as Shira, you asked, right? You don't have exact units for making fonts responsive, but you can take help of these principles. EM is basically the font size of the parent. So, for example, if you mention any property like 2EM, it would mean twice the font of the parent value. No, REM is a different thing. REM is REM, that is a constant. These are relative principal values, basically. As percentage, I told it's relative to the parent div. EM is relative to the parent div's font. Then we would have VW. VW is viewport width. You also have VH, which is viewport height, which is basically viewport is the whole screen that you can see here. This is 100% of your viewport. I'm highlighting it by my cursor, by the way. This is the viewport. This is 100% of the width. If you want something to only be 10%, like you see the nav bar right here on the left, this is, for example, 10% of the screen. And then this might be 90% of the screen. This makes a website responsive on terms of what your screen size is. So percentage was based on the parent div. EM was for the font of the parent div. VW is for making it responsive with respect to the whole viewport. Then you have FR, which is fractional unit in grid basically. It automatically distributes space as we saw using grid templates. Okay, two FR and one FR. It would create automatic grid space. Then No, no, REM does not depend on the window. REM is a constant value. I'll show you the conversion. For example, 10 pixel would be 0.625 REM. This is just a constant value that you give to your fonts or your any sizes. Yeah, we'll move on to making a very basic web page for you all. Like whatever properties that we learned today, right? We'll use them and make a very simple portfolio website, which you can showcase and you can learn from. No doubts, right? Yeah, sure. Anyone else? And okay, so yeah, we'll get on by building a web page for you all. So basically, I'll start by basically asking you all. For example, if I want to create a web page like this, yeah, I'll open Excalibur and I'll ask you all. If I have a web page like this and I want to display my name, Mahendra. Okay, yeah. Uh, Now everyone can see this Excalibur, right? For example, if this is my whole web page, I want to create somewhat a structure like this where I have my name on the top, where I have my designation, where I work with, and everything is centered as well, as you all can see. Does anyone have any idea on how can we start by implementing this? Just unmute and speak.
I think you should first of all just put everything in a flex this thing. Put the div with the display tag flex and then just put justify item center.
Okay, so you're telling me if I put these, I have three tags, three paragraph tags, for example, Mahendra, front-end dev, and senior core.
Yeah.
I should put all three of these things inside Flex.
Yep, and then you can just use the BR tag to go from line to line.
So what Flex direction, by the way? Flex row or Flex column?
Wait, what do you mean?
What, okay, what Flex direction? We studied about Flex direction, right? Row
Hmm.
or column. Which Flex direction would you think you would use?
In this one, I think using column would be right. So there's
Your
two
turn.
directions, right? One which just puts everything left to right, and one is top to bottom. The top to
Yeah.
bottom one.
Yeah, fair
So
enough. Anyone else having any other ideas? I mean, anyone can just try. Like, I know you all are learning and it's your first time, but like, trying is where you get most of the learning. Right? No, okay. We'll start by what Atharva said, right? So, Atharva, you told me create a, I'll just use p tags for now.
okay.
So you're telling me I should use. Yeah, so I have this web page here. I have these three things right here. So how should I go on by putting
In the body, you can use body space style, like using
body
an inline
space?
style.
Okay. Yeah,
And in that display colon flex.
yeah.
Okay. And okay, after flex, you can just use style inside the style, you can just use justify item center.
Or justify
Sorry,
content
justify content center.
and align items.
Yeah, sure.
So justify content, did it. Yep, as you can see, this has given me horizontal.
Yeah, and then can you use the BR tag between each paragraph,
Yeah, okay.
like
So
between
I'll tell
each
you
P
one
tag?
thing about yeah. I'll tell you one thing about using flex, right? If you do not mention any flex direction, it by default give you flex direction as row. So
Right.
if we did not mention any flex direction here, it automatically arranged it in row. So if I were to give here a flex direction, say column, flex direction, column, this would give me in the column direction.
Ah, okay, okay.
So
Got it.
you can use flex properties like that to instantly create structures easily. As you can see, it's the content, how it gets wrapped as well. You don't need to use, if I were to use a B tag instead of flex row, it would overflow at one point.
Okay.
Okay, yes. And I'll just apply some basic properties, background color, aqua. Could apply it to the whole page. Yeah, we'll add background. Okay, then, okay, let's explain. I have to add two more boxes. I have one box here. I have one box here. Here, I just write something about description, any random description. Here also something about me. Can anyone tell me how would you do this by using, for example, uh, grid layout, specifically grid layout? Or anyone, they can just try. Like, again, it's a learning session. If anything goes wrong, I'll just be there to help you. No one? Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry, Sriraj, I missed that. Okay, so you're telling me I should use grid template columns to repeat to FR. You're telling for the new structure, right? Okay, yeah. So I'll just wrap these inside it. I think Atharva you spoke previously, right? For example, whenever I want to create a structured document, as I discussed, we would use divs. If I were to
Yeah,
apply
yeah.
styling properties to the whole page, on the body tag, it would apply to the whole page basically.
Yeah, at the very beginning, I told you to just wrap everything in a div. I think you didn't hear at
Yeah,
that time.
my bad. I think background color would. Yes, now you see background color was the uh, what Sriraj told, great templates. So I would use that as a class. I'll just use grid layout. I'll use a style tab just for reference. I would give dot grid layout, display grids. You told grid columns, T2, yeah. This is just gap and padding, which are gonna. Yep. Do you know any way how you would be able to center this, Sriraj? The text align center. Yep, that's what. I know. So just for reference, what we did here, right? I added a class named grid layout. I initialized grid. I mentioned that there are two columns with free space so that they are dynamically sized. I gave a gap of 10 pixel in between and even a padding of 20 pixel in between the grids. So one thing that I should have given was give a margin of 10 pixel so that there's some space above as well. Yeah, given a margin and a background color. Now, if there was no, for example, text align, it would by default be left aligned because HTML always just aligns it top left. So aligning it to the center, I just use this text align center, which centered it accordingly. Everyone understand this? Any doubts? I'm assuming no. Okay. And then one more thing. Yeah. Okay. Media queries we'll talk about. Um, for example, when I have this width less than 700 pixels, how would you be able to change the color of the background basically? Does anyone remember media query? Like you can just try out. I mean, I know it's new, but trying out will help you learn more, help you understand the concepts. Even if you go wrong, it's not a big deal. Great media. Yep, that's right. Yeah. Except while using media queries, right, we should mention the ID or class as well. So I'll show you on my screen. When I've used @media and I've used max width 600 pixel, as you can see, I need to mention the grid layout as well. The class of what div I want to apply my CSS property to. So when I apply this background color red, you can see when I refresh, when it's 600 pixel, it goes to red, and when it's above 600, it stays in its normal blue color. I hope that. Yeah. Cool. Other than that, I think I would want y'all to make something. For example, okay, I'll open Xcali Drawer. I have, can someone just explain me how you would be making a structure like this using grid, flex, whatever you want to?
I think template columns will be 2 this time,
Yep,
and template rows again will be 2.
yep. Let's try it once as well. Yeah. I'll give two more p tags. So you told in the grid layout, I would use the grid template columns, grid template rows, repeat two. Yes. Yep. And do you know how would we be able to add a border here? Like we discussed on even adding borders.
I mean, I think you can add a border to every item, like every P, you add a border to it. As in, like
Like
you
every
add
p
a
tag.
border to the P tag, yes.
I think this makes a little cumbersome. Like this is the p tag here, but I want to differentiate it as a grid, right? There's property on grid layout is border, 3 pixels, solid black. This applies it to outside, and when I try adding p, I should remove the padding and then add border here. Yeah, I think this is the border that you'll be able to add with grid. Other than that, adding it with p tag won't make any sense here. You're talking about that group layout, Sriraj, dot grid layout. Yeah, I'll try. If this still adds to the p tag. I think how it could work is if I remove gaps, if I remove padding. Till then, I think it protects or something. Yeah, I think there's some uh, upper padding that's hiding this.
Maybe if you put the P's inside a div and then put margins to them.
You're talking about putting all the P's inside a div or each P
Individually, I
individually?
guess.
Individually.
I think I'm not sure.
Because from what I see, I think there's some gap here. There's some grid gap that is being applied. No, I mean, we can have this discussion sometime later on how to add these proper borders. I think there's some part that is missing. There's some yellow. You see this yellow color, right? There's some grid padding that is being added.
Bro, it's not padding, it's the margin of the P paragraph text.
Yeah, margin, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
just
fair
put
enough.
margin 0, let's try that, if possible.
Yep, this works. That is actually smart. Like, yeah, as we discussed, right, the P tag automatically adds some padding, right? Adding the margin 0 defined it, having no margin explicitly, and that gives us this. Does everyone understand how it's working? Like, I'll explain. For example, you have a div which has a grid layout defined here, which has two columns and two rows. Now, each content that you see is a P tag, and each P tag has been given a border here. So you see four lines. This is a border for description, some more description, all have borders, and there is one larger border outside as well. If I remove that, as you see, this is each P tag having a separate border inside itself. And when I just added this thick border outside, it made it feel like a clear distinction. So did you'll understand, Navneet? I think you're talking about this, right?
I mean, I was going in a completely different direction, but sure.
No, like, what are you thinking about this?
I was trying to like separate all those four boxes instead of having them cluttered together.
I mean, see, if you were to use a div tag instead of p tags here, right? Div would not explicitly give out any margin outside. So even working with a div would have made sense if there were no p tags here. Just
Yeah.
using classes and IDs and borders. Yep, that would have worked as well. Yeah. Does anyone else know any other methods, or how we'll be able to do this by Flex, by the way? I mean, okay, yeah. I mean, does anyone remember about the Flex wrap property we discussed? Like, which wraps the content inside, even if it overflows. So what we can do here is basically, you see four p tags, right? We could give each p tag a width of 50 VW. VW was the whole viewport of the width, and give it 50% of that. And then when we use flex wrap on all four, this 50%, this 50% would come in a row. and there would be no space for the third one, so that would come below, and similarly for the fourth p tag as well. Did you understand what I mean? Yeah, so using flex wrap would be a great property. Cool. Does anyone else has any doubts regarding CSS or any other ideas of any implementation that we did right? Okay, so CSS positioning, static and absolute. Okay. When talking about static positioning, it is always relative to your parent div. And when talking about absolute properties, it is basically that sticks on your screen irrespective of what is happening around your uh, connecting divs. For example, when I am to use a static property, a normal CSS, it would all be relative to each other. But when I use absolute, it sticks onto that page irrespective of any other divs surrounding it. Position relative, yeah. Position relative does the same thing. Basically, that is what makes it relative across other divs. Static, I'm not completely sure. Just yeah, so yeah, to explain in clear terms, Sriraj, static positioning is the default behavior. Like, for example, as we were while making this website, whenever you write a p tag, it is always placed at the top left of your div. That is the default positioning of what CSS does. When using relative, it sets its position across relative to your parent, not parent, relative to your connecting divs. Like when we used flex wrap here, since there was no space after this, it wrapped itself to the bottom, to the next line, basically. That was it. Yeah. That was it being relative, yeah. And while making it absolute, it won't care about the overflow or any other property. It would just stick to the page where it is and won't move at all.